Sunday afternoon, about 3:30 in the PM. Already here at the Wynn Encore Casino. Just put my name in the 2-5 game. Seems like there's lots of options today, so we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll play for a while here and then move on somewhere else, or maybe we'll be here all day playing a couple different games. Never know which office you're gonna end up. But either way, less talking today, more playing. Let's get in there. In this hand, I open up pocket sixes from middle position to standard open size of 20. The button calls and both the blinds call. So we go 4 ways to pretty good flop of 6-5-4 with 2 clubs. Flop the old top set. The blinds check to me. The flop is about as wet as it gets. Lots of straight draws, lots of overpairs, lots of flush draws can continue here, so can size a little bit bigger. I decided to bet 65. The button calls and the 2 blinds, they fold. The turn is exactly the worst card in the deck for our holding. The turn is the 8 of clubs. Completes the front door flush draw, completes the straight draw. So as a result of all those things, I check. The button, he starts assembling a bet, but he only bets 50. Pretty small bet into this pot size, which is a fairly good thing. If he does have any of those completed draws, it gives us a pretty good price to draw to the full house. So, not much option here, we call. The river does not pair the board. River is an offsuit 3. So I check again, and this time the button bet's even smaller. He bets $45. The board is pretty subpar at this point for our hand. Our hand went from great to very mediocre at best, I would say. The bet is so small though. So, expecting to win approximately 10% of the time, maybe. I tossed in the $45, but luckily enough, he's got pocket 3s. Interesting. He rivers a set, went for the value bet, went for the thin value, and we'll take it down. So in this hand, it folds around to the button, small blind calls, and we look down at pocket queens in the big blind. Obviously a hand that we want to raise it up with. So we make it 30. The button calls and the small blind folds. The flop is pretty good. It's 9-4-4 with 2 hearts. I think we can bet pretty close to pot size on this flop because I think all pocket pairs that limped in and then called pre-flop or are going to continue on this flop. I decided to bet 50 and the button calls pretty quickly. The turn is another 9. Not a great card, but not a terrible card. You could certainly have some 9s, but I think we'll also have a decent number of pocket pairs and also some overcards and some flush draws and things like that. So I check because I think he'll probably fold most of pretty much all those holdings if I decide to bet again. So it's almost like I'm turning my hand into a bluff. So I check and he bets 100. Still liking my hand at this point. So I call without too much hesitation. River's an offsuit 8, pretty safe card. I check again for the same reasons as I did on the turn. And he opens up Queen Jack of diamonds. So yeah, we win this hand. In this hand, there's an early position raise. and I decided to raise to 25 with Queen Jack to isolate the limper. The small blind calls and the limper folds. The flop is King 9-3 with 2 spades. Pretty good flop to c-bet here. We don't have any showdown value. We have some equity with the gut shot, backdoor flush draw. Gives us some options if we decide to barrel or not. So I c-bet 35. The small blind thinks for a while, and then he calls. The turn is a Jack of spades. Somewhat interesting card. Gives us a pair, gives us a flush draw, and a straight draw. The small blind leads out on this card for $60. Not loving our hand, but not hating our hand at the same time. He could be using the 3rd spade as a scare card, maybe with some smaller middling pairs or a 9 or something like that. We have decent equity to continue against most hands. Ace-high flush we're dead to, but there should be plenty of other hands in there where we have pretty good equity. Raising seems a little out of the question. We now have decent showdown value with 2nd pair. No need to turn our hand into a bluff yet at this point, and a little bit too much potential equity against his range to just fold here. So all that said, seems like calling is the best option, so I call. River's an offsuit 10, gives us a straight. The small blind leads out again, this time for $155. I don't think we have too many options here once again on this river. We make a straight, so we tie just about all straights. We still lose to all flushes, but we do block a lot of potential flushes that he could have. Since we have the queen of spades, that eliminates a lot of potential flush combinations in his holdings. Obviously not all of them, but all that being said, seems like a fairly straightforward call to me. So we make the call. Unfortunately, he rolls over the ace-queen offsuit, not the ace of spades, so I'm not too sure what his plans were, I guess, to get this exact run out. His plan worked out pretty well for himself. I actually thought that, I thought that we won at first, and then I thought that we chopped, and then I realized that we lost. So, fairly strange hand there, but oh well. So we booked a tiny win there in the Win poker room. But I was looking at Bravo, and there are 5-10 games going on right now at the Bellagio. So racked up, game was okay over here. Racked up, gonna head over there real quick. Gonna shoot over there real quick, see what the status of those games is. Five 10 games at the Bellagio, especially on a Sunday night, is well above average. They haven't been getting 5-10 games over there for a while, maybe since the series. But I suspect it might have something to do with the 5 Diamond that's going on right now, the 5 Diamond tournament series. So that could be good or bad. Tournament series, sometimes they bring in more action to a particular venue, so it can be pretty hit or miss. But gotta go check it out, so let's do it. Good old Bellagio. Rack of 10s and $10. Games were a little iffy. Could have been better. Booked a small win. Looked around at the other games, just not spectacular, so we say we stop at one more place. Make it the trifecta. Nice. Back at the Aria. My 3 favorite poker rooms in one night. Why not? I mean, really, I'm just here for the pizza, but we'll probably end up in a poker game. Alright, just sat in a 2-5 game right over here along the rail. Gonna scope out the other games as usual, but we'll be chilling in there for now. 1,000 max buy-in, in for 1,000. Won a hand, the first orbit, up $54 already. Boom, let's go. So the under the gun player opens for 15. The next guy on his left calls. I look at Queen Jack and I decide to 3-bet here. I've said before that I like to do this with my offsuit Broadway hands. I like to put these hands into my 3-bet bluffing range. I've also said that I tend to not 3-bet bluff when the initial raise comes from the early positions. But I just felt like when you open for 15 rather than a bigger size, and there was also the caller in between to add some value to the squeeze play, I felt like it was probably okay. So I raised to 60. It folds back to the initial raiser who calls, as does the under the gun +1. Flop is pretty dry. Flop is 8-6 deuce rainbow. They both check to me. I decide to c-bet. I bet 110. The initial raiser folds pretty quickly, and the under the gun +1 thinks for a little bit, and then he calls. The turn is an ace, brings a backdoor flush draw. He checks, and normally I prefer to barrel again when we pick up equity. In this case, we don't pick up any equity, but I still think it's a pretty good turn card to fire away at. It's pretty tough for this guy to beat anything at this point. If he has a 1-pair type hand, which he most likely has, he's pretty much not beating, he's beating very little at this point. And if he has a straight draw of some sort, then he might not continue with that either. So he checks to me and I bet 230. Good news this time, he releases pretty quickly. We'll take it down. So in this hand, a player in middle position makes a standard open for 20. We look down at ace-10 of spades on the button. I think calling is probably the best option here. Folding, out of the question. Raising, doesn't seem great. Maybe if it was unsuited, but suited we could dominate some other flush draws. Flat seems best, so I call. And the player in the small blind calls as well. Flop is pretty favorable flop. Flop is king, queen, jack, 2 clubs. We flop the joint. Small blind checks. Unfortunately, the initial raiser checks to us. I bet $40. And then the small blind decides to deliver some good news. He raises it up to 125. The initial raiser folds, and it's back on us. So we have an option here. We can either flat call, keep his range wide, not over rep our hand, or we can raise. I think with the range of hands that he is check raising here, pair plus straight draw, 2 pairs, sets maybe, flush draws, all those hands are likely going to continue if I put in a 3-bet on the flop. It doesn't seem likely that he's going to be going anywhere. If I'm up against a tough reg here, I think I'm more likely to flat the check raise. Just keep ranges wide. But against a player that I've never seen before, and especially a player that's been semi-active during the time that we've played together at this table, I think a 3-bet is definitely better. So I put in the 3-bet and I raised to 325. He thinks for a little bit, but not too long, and then he makes the call. Turn is a great card. Turn is a total brick. Turn is a 4 of diamonds. It does bring a second flush draw on board, but very good card. He checks. I think I have somewhere around maybe 750 behind at this point in my stack. I think I have a little bit over a pot size bet left. I think you could go one of two ways here. Could make a bet that keeps most of his range in there, or just ship it all in there. I feel like we're crushing him at this point. There is a handful of cards that I prefer not to see on the river with money behind. But I'm thinking that his most likely hands are 2 pairs or pairs plus straight draws. Could have a flush draw, of course. I'm thinking that I don't really want to fold out his range of hands here. So I make a medium-ish bet. I bet 380. And once again, he doesn't think for too long. And then he makes the call. River card is probably one of the worst cards in the deck. River is the ace of clubs. Completes the flush draw. Puts 4 to a straight up there. We obviously still have the nut straight, but it makes it a little bit tough for a 2-pair type hand to call the river now, because he beats absolutely nothing. We also lose to a flush here, and we chop with a lot of pair plus straight draw hands. I would kind of hate to see him shove here, but he checks. So it's a decision between jamming the $350 or $400 that I have left, or showing it down. It's pretty close. It's such a small bet in relation to the pot size that he may just have to shrug, call it off, or just call it off in frustration. But a thinking player will probably have to fold 2 pair here. Should probably be folding sets. I don't think we're gonna get a 10 to fold. And we're definitely getting called by flushes, obviously, but it's pretty unlikely that he has a flush. He would almost surely jam the flush. So, I don't know, it's pretty close. Jamming it in there certainly seems fine, because pretty much always expect him to jam a flush. But I played it a little bit safe, maybe overly safe, but played it safe. I check back. He shows 10-9 offsuit. Slightly frustrating river card, pretty disappointing. Had him right where we wanted him for a huge pot. No love on the river, he gets bailed out. We chop it up. Nice. All right, that's 3 for 3. That's 3 small wins in 3 different poker rooms in one day.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you for asking.
$59 win at the Encore. $225 win at Bellagio. And a $296 win here at the Aria. Wrap up the trifecta. That's good for about $580 on the day. Not bad. No complaints. That's all in a day's work. And the good news is, we get to start all over again tomorrow. Back to it then.